Hi, everyone. How are you? Thanks for being here. So this panel, we're going to try to keep it light and informative. So before we begin and get into some questions, I would like to have each of the panelists please have a brief introduction about yourself. And I will add one additional question for you. What is your favorite mobile app on your phone?
Okay, you want me to go first?
Sure.
Hi, I'm Ken Bronfin. I'm with the Hearst Corporation, right down 57th Street. We are both a consumer media business and a business services company as well. I'm with the corporate venture arm of Hearst called Hearst Ventures. We invest in technology companies around the world. We've been investing for 25 years now. I was just telling her that our first investment was Netscape, which in my eyes is where it all started. We've been actively investing in China now for about 15 years. We started off with a joint venture between Hearst, a company named IDG, and News Corp. So together we invested in over 75 Chinese companies. And then since then we've opened our own office there and have been actively investing. So while I haven't lived there, I feel like I have. I've been there 40 or 50 times. I know my way around a bit, but I still don't speak the language, unfortunately. And my favorite app, a great question. I'm a very organized person. I use a program called Triolo, which is my to-do list. And I live on Triolo. And if you say, what are you doing next? What's the next thing you got to do? I go look, okay, I say, it's dinner time, and I go do it. So it's, a lot of project management and programmers know about Triolo. I use it for personal application, and that's something I look at 30 or 40 times a day.
That's
I hate
great.
to admit it, but it's true.
And now, Chao.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jing Chao. Jing is my first name. Jing is my family name. Chao is my first name. So I am a game designer at a mobile game studio called Dots, where I design and prototype new game ideas and deliver stylish and meaningful game experience for mobile users. So before that, I was trained at NYU Game Center to make games that with emerging experiment games and game development. Before I came to United States, I worked at Tencent as a game designer for 4 years. So I worked with 2K Sports to deliver their famous NBA 2K games into Chinese online game market. And also I was working on mobile games when the mobile game market just emerged in China. So I also translate I also translate English books, game books from English to Chinese. I worked on how games move us before, and now I'm working on family at play. Thank you. Oh wait, sorry. My favorite game app is Two Dots, which is our famous puzzle game that about connecting dots and to make squares. Thank you.
She showed it to us earlier. It's literally connecting dots. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joyce Shen. I'm based here in New York City. I'm with Tenfore Holdings, investing in enterprise software and data companies. I also have a side project called Tech China Post, where I write a newsletter on a weekly basis about technology, innovation, venture capital in China, inspired by my trip 3 years ago to China and saw the activity there, which was really mind-boggling. A lot of the professional experience that I had with respect to China go back 15 years ago when I worked at IBM and saw how large enterprise technology companies in the US had to try to navigate the partnership landscape in China. And I was also one of the people who got deployed to Beijing right before the financial crisis to help them establish an investment fund to invest in Chinese enterprise software company. So I have always seen the technology landscape, both from an enterprise perspective and also tracking the evolution of technology innovation in that area.
So there was a reason why I asked our panelists, why what is their favorite app. Let's define, the Chinese user experience. So, in your opinion, and this is a question open for all of you, is what, in your opinion, is the Chinese user experience? What are they? What makes them special?
I'll go first. I mean, I think there's a wide variety of things that are different in China than they are here in the U.S. First of all, the Chinese are far more advanced in mobile, knowing, of course, that a broad part of that population grew up solely in a mobile environment. These are tier 2, tier 3 cities that didn't have broadband, they didn't have laptops, they didn't have PCs, so they started on their mobile and they're still on their mobile. And as a result, the mobile experience is significantly better, I believe, in China, far more advanced. So I think that's one part. I think a second part is about payments, far more advanced on payments, and that means a lot in terms of e-commerce and where that's gone. There's something like 600 million people who can do peer-to-peer payments. I bet you all of us couldn't do peer-to-peer payments like they do. And I think that's advanced the business. I also think in terms of the overall environment, the BAT companies, Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent, really control that universe. You live within almost a walled garden. And for those of you who use WeChat, WeChat is every aspect of Chinese communications, whereas we use Slack and we use Zoom and we use a variety of other applications. They live within this huge environment called WeChat, and I think that's a big, big difference. So those are some of the reasons that I think it's very, very different doing business there and very different thing for the consumers there.
What about Joyce and Chao? You have also had experience and actually is from China yourself. Do you echo some of the observations here about mobile and the usage of mobile apps and this platform in China?
Yeah, I mean, I can start, and you have a lot more experience on the entertainment gaming side. If you go to China today, and that was my experience even 3 years ago, it was very difficult for me to order food, get transportation, and even navigate, because almost everything was done 3 years ago through WePay, Alipay, right? The QR code was your gateway into all kinds of services. And so for someone who has lived here for a very, very long time, I still assume that I can use physical cash. If you mentioned Tencent and Alibaba, I mean, they're 20 years old. So you see their evolution. I mean, they are really the companies that made China to skip the iterations of adoption. It went from a cash-only society to mobile society. And one of the things I think is very different is, here I think the assumption when we think about mobile apps or, the analogy of WeChat is, who are your millennial customers? Who are your customers in age 30 to 40 where there's a lot of willingness to pay, and that's where you get the engagements. If you look at the statistics of WeChat, more than 10% of user base is age 50 and above. And within the age of 50 and to 60, 70% of that segment use WeChat as a mission critical tool. And even between age 60 to 70, it's 50%. And then you ask the reason why. So, one thing I think is not as obvious, but it was highlighted in Economist article in 2018, is that the retirement age in China for most organizations is around 60. Some is voluntary, but a lot of it is mandatory. And so we have 1.3 billion people. There are lots of infrastructure around how do you enable this population that will have little to do after you're 60. So the government and many of the organizations actually give subsidies to create universities for elders, age of 60 and above. And one of the curriculum is to help them learn how to use technology. And one of the courses is to learn how to use WeChat and other tools to be able to navigate. And when you go to China today, you'll be surprised to see that a lot of the social groups for elders, a lot of for elders and other groups for this demographic to get together is solely through WeChat. And WeChat has taken this advantage and built a lot of services around it, whether it's ride, whether it's insurance, whether it's entertainment, whether it's content, and so forth.
Yeah, I think that definitely a big part of the Chinese user experience is mobile apps and games. Because I can see that Chinese users is become a very mobile, heavily internet users. It's not only that you are using WeChat as a very essential surviving skill in China. It's also like, it's not only Taobao or Alipay, it's also entertainment like Douyin, which I think is called TikTok here, like for short form video, and also for like shopping like a group purchase apps like Pinduoduo. I believe it also has a name here like Buy Together here, and also a lot of games, of course, is like more educational games and more casual games, but also like Minecraft and also heavy MMORPG games is happening right now in China. And I can see that people is not only spending more time on mobile phone, but also the demographic is become more diverse. It's like for the most popular game that the Honor of Kings, that it has actually more female players in the game than male players. And also like more younger generation and more older generation is using the like mobile games.
So I did a little bit of research online before this, and apparently, WeChat, we have discussed quite a lot. The monthly active users now is about a billion as of last quarter. Just as comparison, Facebook's monthly active users is about tracking at 2 billion. But when you're looking about Facebook, which is global, and whereas WeChat is predominantly, in China, that is a huge, market share. And then apparently, in China, people spend 5 hours a day also on their mobile devices. So what do they do? What do they do? What are the emerging trends that you have noticed, from a technology developer perspective and also from an investment perspective? What are they doing?
You want to go first?
Oh, yeah, I can go first. So when I was living in China, WeChat is like when I wake up, I check all the messages on my WeChat, which I have probably 1,000 contacts and 100 group chats. And I will check for like half hour, there's so many messages. And then I will read all the WeChat news, which is I follow all those content platform and then send me their daily update of the news. I normally see that, watch them on my transportation on the work. And then in the night, during the lunch break or casual time, you play casual games or other games. And then in the night, it's always time for like short videos or iQIYI videos or WeChat videos, and also more like app planning stuff there, I think.
I mean, if you have done business in China now, it's a very different environment. A lot of people send legal documents over WeChat. Most people don't necessarily use email. A lot of things is done through WeChat. So think about the apps that you use most frequently on your phone today, like the 5 apps, and all those capabilities is in one app. And WeChat also is one of the 2 or 3 apps that have voice over IP. So to Kenneth's point, you don't need to use Zoom, right? So all that is in there. And so it's pretty easily you can add up to 5 days, 5 hours a day from a utilization perspective. I think the other thing is here is very much fragmented, right? So you have an app for wedding planning, an app for communication, and so forth. It's a different macro environment, consumption environment, but WeChat, Alibaba, and those guys have really built their marketing and branding around life events and cultural events, right? So the red envelopes used to be a physical phenomena, a cultural phenomena. Chinese New Year, when a new baby is born, wedding, there is a physical exchange of value. Now it's all digital. And they've done it in such a viral network way. So they increase the opportunity for you to participate as a user because they literally tie into all the life events that you have and the cultural events, and there are many in a society like China.
So the one thing I guess I would add, and there's probably a lot we could all add, is shopping. And China, as you know, is a world of shoppers. The consumerism is remarkably high. And part of that is the society and the way that people have progressed up the social economic food chain, so to speak. But they've made it, in part because of payments and other things, so frictionless. And we're all excited that Amazon delivers to us in 2 days, right? That for me was a breakthrough, like, oh my goodness, I can get anything in 2 days. 2 days would seem like a lifetime in China. And JD, one of the big e-commerce businesses, years ago set a 6-hour policy. That's only gotten sooner. Groceries typically are delivered in 30 minutes. And because of the cost of labor and all the other factors we could talk about, it's much easier to shop. And we're an investor in a company that does messenger services. And it's sort of a Uber-like peer-to-peer messenger service business. And because there's so many people who are available for messengering, you can literally have someone pick up something up from a shop in 5 minutes and bring it to you. So I think that's really interesting. And luxury goods, which is a big focus and could be a whole topic of a panel, is so incredibly strong. It's not just something you wear, it's a social statement, and luxury goods. And I just see so many people looking for sales and looking for special items in the luxury category. That's not just wealthy people, that's the entire middle class as well. And so I think shopping is something, at least the people I know, spend a lot of time just looking around for deals and reading about opportunities like that.
So in a sense of from looking here, from the West and from an investment standpoint, what are some of the traits or trends that you find that is unique, in this particular market or demographic that is worth investing in?
I think from a kind of investment perspective, I think there's a lot of actual similarity between like the Chinese market or like the German market. So you see a lot of, you have the equivalent of the Uber in China. You have the equivalent of Snapchat in China. And there has historically been a lot of exchanges, right, from an academic level. And so it's not surprising that many of the talents will go back. And you have 1.3 billion people there. And if you're the first mover, or even not necessarily the first mover at the national level, but a first mover at a tier 2 or tier 3 city, there is a huge market opportunity. So it's more about what are the models that work for, to me, that work for consumers in other big markets that don't exist in China, and they can replicate very quickly. On the reverse, I think it's actually much more interesting, which is how are those traits in the startup company in China inform investment thesis here? Because in some ways they're like much more ahead. And to Kenneth's point, I was in China 10 years ago, and they were able to deliver airline tickets within 30 minutes. They literally had a carrier to come to my office and give me a physical ticket 10 years ago. If you think about what Facebook is trying to do, if you think about a lot of the social apps in the US or how they're trying to diversify their business model, WeChat has done it very successfully, right? Integration of payment, integration of services, integration of digital coins, content, streaming, and so forth.
Now, with the proliferation of all these services, and everything has been, digitalized. As you said, the exchange of the hongbaos now is done via digitally. So let's talk about data in this way. So this question is for you. When we were in the room back then, you mentioned that in terms of the technology landscape, between the West and China, in the space of AI, you have a view about who's going to win.
Okay. Well, my simplistic view, and I'm not an expert on this, but I just look at the developments of artificial intelligence here in the United States, which is moving along, and then I compare it to what I see in China, and I see, along with that, I see a tremendous amount of venture capital dollars, both U.S. and Chinese. I see government support for artificial intelligence, which exists at a lower level here, but certainly not what's going on there. I see more manpower. I see just stronger efforts. So when people, the headline in Bloomberg says, who's going to win, is it China or U.S. in the AI war? I have to put my money on China. I just admit that. And it's not just they have all those capabilities that I just mentioned and all that currency to invest, they also have the data. And whether the data is collected appropriately or not, it's a much larger population, it's much easier gathered. All this concentration of the companies we've talked about allow them to gather even more data. So I think they win in the data game, they win in the investment game, and they have a lot of very smart people who are coming out of the universities here and coming out of great universities in China as well. So that's the simple formula that I look at and believe that, there's a lot of very interesting things going on in artificial intelligence there that we've invested in. I think they're going to go a long way.
What about your view, about user engagement, and certainly you are in game developing. Obviously, then from a development perspective, you can have a lot of data about user engagements and the way how they interact, with certain games. Do you see any trends that is moving towards using more machine learning or AI, in this development in the gaming, in an interactive side?
For the gaming aspect, I would say the Chinese game market is pretty heavy. So a lot of MMORPGs and hero combat games, but most of the characters, they are static design. They're not using machine learning or data-driven character design. And so I haven't seen how data could be used to design the game character or game system. But I can see that when you see the game's retention data or how the game is doing on revenue, then data is very useful to collect in player behaviors and how which buttons they're clicking, how they spend their time on which section of the games, how long is their daily session, how many times they open the game every day. This is a very important tools for game designer and production team to design the details of the game.
So I'm going to switch the questions a little bit, to talk about the recent events as of late. So as you know, our relations between U.S. and China isn't exactly in the very civil spot right now. So how do you what is your opinion about the fact that some of the American technology is now being blocked, from being used by Chinese technology companies, and that, we will be adding more. Now, taking away the political framework, for a second, is that from a technology standpoint, how do you see that this dynamic, will unfold, in the near future? Will we have a situation where we will have two major superpowers that has two different sets of technology, and how would they interact? How would that translate to the user experience on both sides?
I mean, it's a difficult question, and I think for folks who have worked in technology for many years, it's always it's a wave. There are obviously many factors that contribute to the current decisions that are being made, but China historically, for those of you who don't necessarily know the structure of kind of science and innovation in China, I mean, China historically has all these research institutions, right, in every single kind of science and technology. And so the domestic investments will always continue. And now you have this added pressure that they realize that there needs to be de-risking and reducing the dependency on third-party technology. I think it would just push them much harder to invest and to partner elsewhere. That's my view. The kind of investment that I've gone to, I mean, last year, there were 100 billion venture capital in China. That doesn't even count the Chinese government investments in science and technology. And if you also look at the initiative that Chinese government is putting out with the Belt and Silk Initiative, where they're partnering with the countries along the Silk Belt Road, is not just about infrastructure. It's not just about energy. It's about science and technology, innovation, bring talents to China and from China. It's going to be painful for a while, but I think that would just push the Chinese government to realize that they need to actually put a lot more capital in play to reduce that dependency. And you're going to see that. I expect to see more competitive technologies in the next 10 to 20 years.
And Chao or Ken, do you have a viewpoint about this?
No, I 100% agree, and I think it will ultimately push China into more development. They have the capabilities, and they will be independent. Hopefully the political situation will change and we'll come back together, but it's certainly going to spur them on to increase their investment and to be able to support themselves through all these technologies.
And I guess with you, Chao, will that make your job a bit harder to do, in the near term?
I know, even with the Chinese government's regulation on games from last year, but China is still the biggest game market in the world. So I feel it's actually still pushing because it's huge amount of audience. It's pushing the developers on Chinese market to develop more diverse game content. It's not. Because this huge amount of audience is having more female and more younger generation and more older generation, and their need is pushing the developers to explore new territory on the game design part. It's not only for education games, but also for what the older generation that Joyce talked about, what kind of games they like, what kind of games that they think they will help them to having a better life.
And Justin, I think we're now for audience questions. Is that right?
We've got time for one question, maybe? If that's all right, we've run out of time. So if we have one question or two questions, really quick, if somebody will get them. Yeah.
No pressure.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask, Chao mentioned this about education technology in China. It's an $8 billion industry and growing. Where do you see those trends happening and bringing in talent or cultivating more talent in China, especially with the fact that education is such a highly valued experience in the Chinese country?
Let's get one more question on the table as well. So just ask, we had one more hand that was up back there? Okay, one more real quick, just get it on the table.
So we heard about privacy concerns in pretty much all the previous panels, but not in this one. So I just wanted to get your point of view about privacy in China, and if it's a concern that people have.
Okay, so education and privacy.
Okay. I'll try education. Try.
Take the easy one.
So, it's very interesting that we as a venture capital organization have sort of stayed away from education here in the United States, here in Europe, because we felt that, we didn't want to do business with the state and federal governments, and people weren't really willing to invest in education as much as we thought. But then when we arrived in China, we saw a completely different world. And we look at education sort of in two parts. One is language learning education. And as many of you know, a person who speaks English well the world is open to them in far many more opportunities. Someone who's an accountant at a local firm will make $10,000 a year and going to work with the same accounting skills at a global firm will make $30,000 a year. So the price of great English, or the value of great English, is substantial. And we actually have an investment in a company called LingoChamp, or Lulisha, here in the it's traded here in the United States, and it does just that. It teaches English on an app. So we found an almost unlimited market for English language learning, and we're super excited about that. We've also spent a lot of time on K through 12. Everyone knows that, with the one child per family rules, that people are willing to invest an extraordinary amount into education. We've seen a lot of very good apps. I think there's a new generation of apps that are, not just sort of one-on-one learning, but far more advanced with adaptive learning and so on. So I think that's a great area for investment. Coming from an investment perspective, I think they're going to exceed all the technologies that exist here in the United States in many ways because of that focus. And I think it's an area very much to watch in the future.
Privacy, someone's got to take it.
Well, I think you can look at privacy in many different lenses, right? So, you can look at the data privacy here in the U.S. versus in Europe, and if you think about privacy in China, you have to take. I think you have to take a number of different factors into consideration, which are quite unique. China has 1.3 billion people, so it's a very different conversation when it comes to stability, public safety, getting millions of people into one place and so forth. It's also a very diverse country with more than 50 plus ethnic groups. So that's one consideration. You can argue from your own perspective what is the right way of ensuring that a country of 1.3 billion people can operate the way they operate and continue to lift the country into higher, per capita, GDP per capita. The other consideration is, I think we talked about this a little bit, that there's this concept about how do you build trust into technology. And the trust in technology in many of the applications we use here today is put in terms of use or term of service, and the companies expect you to read their privacy terms and how they're using your data. I would say that in China, trust is created through people you're familiar with. And if they see people that they trust and use particular application, if they see within their own community, they're using kinds of services, that trust is organically created. Obviously, there are other levels of trust topics you can discuss, but data transparency, data privacy, that should be international, right? There should be guideline internationally around how you to manage that, but that shouldn't just be a kind of a China-specific issue.
Yeah, I want to say that for the risk of privacy that is less serious in China, it's barely happened to me or happened to anyone around me. So people naturally don't think about privacy will be a big danger to their life. So we trust app or software more about our data because we believe they will protect us, or it's not like a big risk.
All right, well, thank you, and thank you for all your time.